Hello and welcome back to my Astronomy Nights. I'm Derek, and in this video we're going to take a look at Messier 71. This is a small but really interesting star cluster in the constellation of Sagitta. Sagitta is a summertime constellation and it lies within that large summer triangle asterism. This places Messier 71 right within a rich star field of the Milky Way arm, and this, along with the fact that it has a metal-rich composition and it's quite loose in nature, have all added to the difficulty in classifying Messier 71 over the years. Was it an open cluster or was it a globular cluster? In this video we're going to take a look at where Messier 71 is on the sky, what type of cluster it is, and how it might look through your imaging setup or your eyepiece. But first we'll take a quick look at the history of Messier 71. Messier 71, sometimes known as the Angelfish Cluster, is 13,000 light years away from us, and it measures 7 arc minutes on the night sky and is quite bright, shining at magnitude 8.4. It was discovered by Philippe Luz de Chasseau, a Swiss astronomer who was a comet hunter, and he was famous for finding the comet of 1743 and describing it. This was a large comet that was brighter than Jupiter and gained 6 tails at one stage in its orbit. So a really spectacular comet, and he sketched and engraved it. And he also compiled a list of nebulous objects similar to the way Messier did years later, and it included 21 objects, and some of those were famous ones like the Eagle Nebula Messier 16 and the open cluster of Messier 25 in Sagittarius. But one of the objects on that list was Messier 71. He described it as a pale nebulous object. De Chasseau's list didn't gain that kind of notoriety as the Messier catalogue list. It was more of a private list that was shared among astronomers. So it was rediscovered again when Pierre Michon and Charles Messier were compiling that list, and in the summer of 1780 Michon discovered Messier 71 within Sagitta, and then Charles Messier did a follow-up observation in October of that year, and thus it became Messier 71. It wasn't until William Herschel observed this with his much larger telescope in 1783 that he was able to resolve it out into stars. And a few years later he coined the term of the globular cluster to try to distinguish between these different types of clusters that he was observing with his larger telescope. It was observed by him on many occasions and by his sister Caroline and his son John. Harlow Shapley of the Shapley-Sawyer concentration chart for globular clusters, he described the cluster as more of a tight-knit and dense open cluster rather than a globular cluster. After Shapley, James Cuffey set out to confirm that Messier 71 was a globular cluster, and he ran tests on it in 1943, some colour diagram tests, but he found the results to be inconclusive in confirming that it was a globular cluster. And his quote kind of sums up the difficulty in trying to put a pin on what type of cluster Messier 71 is. The tendency of colour magnitude diagrams in the very rich galactic clusters to resemble the diagrams observed in the globular clusters emphasises again the poorly defined boundaries between the two classes of objects. And it wasn't until Alan Alves Brito and his colleagues ran a study on Messier 71 on the abundance variations within the cluster, and their findings showed the existence of a short horizontal branch. And this is part of the life cycle on main sequence stars like our Sun after the red giant phase, and this is indicative of a globular cluster. And they were also able to show the findings to explain that metallicity of the stars within the cluster as well, and they related that to the young age of the cluster being only 9 to 10 billion years. All of this pointing towards Messier 71 being a globular cluster. So to capture my image of M71, I initially captured data in the month of June this year, so extremely short nights to be capturing data. So I went for something bright and something easy to track down, and that was Messier 71. I ran some RGB colour on it. I think I got an hour each channel, but it was spread out over 2 nights because I was just able to get that darkness kind of in the centre of the night late on. And we didn't get an abundance of clear nights throughout the month of June, in contrast to July where we've had a really good spell of clear weather. For my RGB data, I was using my 200 PDS on my NEQ6 mount, and I had my QHY camera with the filters in it from ZWO. I ran the colour on it And it wasn't until a week later or so when I was editing that photo that I realised that the focus was just a little soft on it. So I tried my best to sharpen it and bring out some of that detail, but it was just a little soft. So I used one of the clear nights in the last week or so to try and capture some more data, and rather than go for another full run of RGB, I just captured a couple of hours. The night of the 19th, it did cloud over after about 1 o'clock, so I captured 2 hours on M71 before it hit the meridian, and I was able to use that data then just to sharpen up the overall image with that colour set. It's a really nice cluster to capture because you bring out all that detail of the stars within that Milky Way arm, and it's a really rich field of view along with those little blue stars that kind of are the marking point of tracking down Messier 71. We've had a really good spell of weather in July here in Ireland, so I had a few nights to observe Messier 71, not just focusing on one single night. I got to observe it over a few different nights, and a few different nights of different seeing as well. So I got to compare it in and around, say, new moon phase, and when the moon was above the horizon and when the sky wasn't so clear. So I was able to capture some of my session observing as well, and try to describe to you what I was seeing through the eyepiece of my telescope. So I have my telescope set up and ready to go, and I'm just going to talk you through the process of locating Messier 71 by using my finder scope and eyepiece. So to begin with, the best thing to do is to find that bright star in Aquila of Altair. It's the center of that three-star line that creates the head of the eagle, and it's at the base of the summer triangle. So the best thing to do is center that star with your finder scope. Once that's centered, at the moment, you just want to track that line towards Albireo, the head of Cygnus, the swan. So you want to find Sagitta. It's the little arrow shape halfway through. But if you run up to about halfway, it's just over the width of your fisted arm's length. And if you just slowly run up with your finder scope, you'll see the tail end of Sagitta. And that's the two stars together. They're quite close. And then you just want to track across to the east, across the constellation of Sagitta, until you put those two center stars in your finder scope. Mine is a 10 by 50, and those two stars just sit either side of my finder scope. Once you have those two stars, just in between them, at the halfway point between those two stars, you have a little line of three stars. They look like they're receding away from us. There's one brighter, and they just get dimmer as they work their way back. And those three stars are those three stars you see in the image with Messier 71. And that's those three little stars. You can just see them in your finder scope. The brightest one is to the south. And if you line those up with your finder scope, you know then that you have Messier 71 in your eyepiece. And there it is. Three bright stars, and just to the east of those three bright stars, you can see that hazy patch of Messier 71. As you look closer at those three stars, you'll see there's another star, a couple of faint stars beside it, almost making the W shape of a small Cassiopeia. So I'm going to describe Messier 71, but I'm just going to have to knock off my red light, because even though it looks quite dim, it is quite bright. I'm kind of sure that the lens is here. Even though it is a red light, it is quite bright. And when you're trying to concentrate on a dim target, even a red light can be distracting. Yeah. So I've reacquired Messier 71 in my eyepiece, and when you're observing it, you see that the most northern of those three stars is the faintest, or at least equally as faint as the second one, and then there's a brighter one then towards the south west. The cluster itself has the nickname of the angelfish cluster, and that's because when if you observe it closely, you can see that it has a slightly elongated triangular shape pointing towards those 3 stars. It's a lovely faint cloud of stars. It's very hard to resolve them out until you add a little bit of magnification. But at 60 power, you can start to see them. You can see some of those brighter stars that sit around the edge. There's a small little cluster of stars just below the main body of it that show up just above it to the north. And if you avert your vision a little or concentrate on that line of 3 bright stars, you can tease out that angelfish shape. It's not a dramatic fish shape, but it is that. It's quite a distinct triangular shape that's on it. You can see why it was confused with an open cluster, or confused between the both. There could easily be an open cluster, and it could easily be a globular cluster. I like to think of it as being that globular cluster that's slightly obscured by the gas in the Milky Way arm, and we're just peering through that gas. And then you have all those red stars in that area. I was observing it the last few nights. I've observed M71. I've had a really good run of nights on it, and it's much easier when you've no light at all. You can really pick it up, but at the moment I can still see that shape. You can see some of those stars. There's one star sitting to the south. It's right tucked in beside it to the south. There's another one on the northeast sitting beside that small little cluster of 3 or 4 stars. This is a really lovely cluster to observe, and it's quite handy to track it down using that technique of starting at Aquila with Altair. You're just moving your telescope to the north. It'll be a little bit off depending on the time of night you're observing it and whether it's past meridian, but it's generally that kind of northerly movement. And as you do that towards Albireo, you come across those stars of Sagitta, so it's easy enough to track down that constellation, and you can see it with the naked eye from a decently dark site. You'll pick up them, especially Gamma Sagitta, that brighter star. I'm in a Bortle 3, Bortle 4. I've a little bit of nearby light, but not a lot, and it's a really nice night. This time of year you have that moon. The moon was just behind this tree line. Oh, you can't see it. There's a tree line just in front of me. It takes up about the bottom 10 degrees of the sky. The moon just passed behind those trees all through the evening until it set just about 20 minutes ago. So you can still see some of that light sitting on the horizon, but it doesn't affect those northern objects that you're trying to track down, especially star clusters. They're very easy to observe. When you're observing M71 as well, it's right beside Messier 27. It's very easy to spot it. You're working off that same star of Gamma Sagittae, so it's very easy to track down. And then in the other direction, off the tail end of the arrow, where those 2 stars sit side by side, you can just see that lovely asterism of the coat hanger. So if you have binoculars on you as well, when you're observing, you can pick up that as well. It's a really interesting asterism to observe. Messier 71 is a really nice object to get out and observe, and this time of year is a really good time to get out under the stars. Caroline Herschel's notes on observing Messier 71 included observations of Messier 27 and the wild duck cluster Messier 11, along with Messier 14, the globular cluster in Ophiuchus. So this is a really nice part of the sky to get your telescope out and just hop around. There's some really nice objects there, but I will look at more of these objects in my next video on what's in the night sky for the month of August, including the solar eclipse and the Perseid meteor shower. So a really exciting month to get out under the stars. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, clear skies.